Wild hearts, untamed souls. Amara Gray was used to the stillness of nature. The hum of the wind through ancient trees, the subtle rustle of leaves underfoot, and the unspoken language of animals that she captured through her lens. All of it was her sanctuary. As a wildlife photographer, she had spent her life trekking through the wilds, unbothered by the constraints of society or the demands of relationships. Love was as foreign to her as the bustling cityscapes she avoided at all costs. But life had a funny way of rewriting scripts. Amara had been hired by a luxury ecotourism company to photograph their new safari lodge in Kenya. It wasn't her typical gig. She preferred freelance work over corporate commissions. But the paycheck was too good to pass up. Her time in the wild would still be hers, or so she thought. The complication arrived in a sleek black suit and polished leather shoes, stepping out of a private plane with all the charisma of someone who had never been out of cell phone range. Alexander Reed, CEO of Reed Enterprises, was the man behind the Safari Lodge's development. He had built his empire in the concrete jungles of Manhattan, a world as distant from Amara's as the stars from the sea. Their first meeting was nothing short of a disaster. "You're late," Amara said bluntly, her arms crossed as she stood in the dusty airstrip. Alexander raised an eyebrow, adjusting his sunglasses. "Fashionably, I'd say." Her scowl deepened. "The animals don't operate on your schedule, Mr. Reed. If we miss the light for the photos, we're done for the day." He smirked, unbothered. "Noted, Ms. Gray. Lead the way." The days that followed were a clash of worlds. Alexander's incessant phone calls disrupted the peace of the savannah, and his tailored suits looked laughably out of place against the rugged landscape. Yet, there was something about him, his wit, his unflinching confidence, that intrigued Amara. Despite her resistance, she found herself laughing at his dry humor and marveling at his ability to adapt. One evening, after a long day of photographing elephants at a watering hole, they found themselves sitting around a campfire. The crackling flames cast flickering shadows, and the distant roar of lions echoed in the night. Alexander seemed different in the firelight, less polished, more real. "You seem surprised," he said, catching her staring. "I didn't expect you to last this long out here," she admitted. "Most people like you would have been on the first plane back to the city." "People like me?" he asked, his tone teasing but his eyes searching. She hesitated. "The kind who don't get their hands dirty." He laughed, a deep, genuine sound that sent an unexpected warmth through her. "You'd be surprised, Amara. I wasn't always a suit and tie kind of guy." Intrigued, she leaned closer. "What do you mean?" He stared into the fire for a moment before speaking. "I grew up in Brooklyn. Single mom. We didn't have much, but she taught me the value of hard work. The city was my escape, my way of making something of myself. But I've lost touch with this." He gestured to the vast expanse of wilderness around them. "Being here feels like coming home in a way I didn't expect." Something in his voice resonated with her. For the first time, she saw Alexander Reed not as a corporate giant but as a man searching for something, just like her. Their bond deepened over the following weeks. Alexander started leaving his phone behind during their excursions, immersing himself in the beauty of the wild. Amara found herself drawn to his curiosity, his willingness to learn, and the way he looked at her, as if she were the most captivating thing in the world. One afternoon, they climbed a rocky ridge to capture a panoramic view of the savannah. The climb was steep, and Amara was in her element, moving with the ease of someone who had spent her life scaling mountains. Alexander, on the other hand, struggled. "You okay back there, city boy?" she teased, glancing over her shoulder. "Just fine," he panted, wiping sweat from his brow. "Remind me why I agreed to this?" "Because you trust me," she said with a smirk. When they reached the summit, the view took their breath away. The golden plains stretched endlessly, dotted with acacia trees and herds of grazing animals. As they sat side by side, Amara felt a strange sensation. Contentment, coupled with a growing affection she couldn't deny. "This is the most alive I've felt in years," Alexander said softly. Amara turned to him, her heart racing. "Me too." The turning point came during a routine drive to photograph a lion pride. A sudden burst of rain turned the dirt road into a muddy trap, and their jeep skidded dangerously close to a steep ravine. When the vehicle finally came to a halt, they realized they were stranded. Amara's survival instincts kicked in, but Alexander surprised her by staying calm and resourceful. Together, they worked to secure the jeep and set up a makeshift shelter. As the storm raged around them, they huddled together for warmth. "You're not what I expected," she admitted, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Neither are you," he replied, his gaze intense. "You've shown me a world I never knew I needed." In that moment, the barriers between them dissolved. They kissed, the storm raging around them, a fitting backdrop to the tempest of emotions they felt. But love, like the wild, was unpredictable. When the trip ended, Alexander returned to New York and Amara to her nomadic life. Their separation was agonizing. Alexander's calls became her lifeline, but the distance tested their connection. Months later, Alexander surprised her by inviting her to a gala in Manhattan. At first, Amara was hesitant. The city was overwhelming, and she didn't fit into his world of black tie events and high society chatter. But when she arrived, she found Alexander waiting for her, his eyes lighting up as he saw her. "You're the most stunning thing in this room," he said, taking her hand. That night, amidst the glittering skyline of Manhattan, he confessed his feelings. "I don't care about the city or my business. What matters is you, Amara. You've shown me what it means to truly live." Tears filled her eyes. "You've changed me too, Alexander. I never thought I could let someone in, but you've proven me wrong." Their love story was one of contrasts, a wild heart meeting an untamed soul. Together, they found balance, each teaching the other to embrace life in all its unpredictability. Under the vast skies of the savannah and the bright lights of the city, their love flourished, proving that even the most unlikely pair could create something extraordinary.